Good morning. This is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Miss V Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters. PsychicTarot.ca, book your tarot reading and unlock your spiritual journey. And the Pepper Master, hot pepper sauces made from farm fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Well, good morning and hello, kids and cubs, and welcome to season 5 and episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. Oh, Canada. Always 100% Canadian. Today, recording day is Thursday, December 11th, 2025, and hopefully it has stopped snowing here at the Beaver Lodge. It snowed all day yesterday until like about 10 o'clock at night, and it was already snowing yesterday morning when I was doing the show. And it was wet and very heavy, and shoveling last night was not as fun an experience as it was a couple of days ago when it was all light and fluffy. So worked pretty hard last night. I'm your host, the Eager Beaver, pronouns he, him, hey, Mr. Beaver A. And not with me as usual is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly, who is probably making sure that he's got the final touches on packing his bags for his ski trip out to Calgary. So I hope he has a wonderful time out there skiing and spending time with friends and getting a little bit of a break, a little bit of a vacation, a little bit of a rest because he has been working extremely hard at the new job, and he's earned this. So let's put our paws together and send a. Whoops! I just went all fuzzy again. Put our paws together and get some cheer and send some good vibes to our dear Mr. Grizzly so that he has a wonderful vacation. There you go. I'm back to normal again. Less fuzzified. I'm fuzzy enough, right? I mean, I'm a beaver. I got the fuzz going on. All right. A big thank you goes to our podcast founding sponsors, the Pepper Master, the Miss V Mysteries from Corbin Moon Publishing, and PsychicTarot.ca. Damn fam, how is your mental health today? I am doing surprisingly well, considering that yesterday I had a complete and total god awful day. Um, I um, I went after the show to the bus stop to go to my curling match, and for some reason, my bus pass, which normally is actually physically chained to my satchel, um, the chain had disappeared along with the bus pass. Just gone. Have no idea when it fell off, where it fell off. It's just gone. Bus driver was nice enough to let me on without bus fare so I could get to the match on time. Played the match. For some reason, forgot my glasses at home. So the match went about as well as you could expect. In fact, when we play two-person stick curling, the most a team can score in an end is 6, and the other team did score 6 against us when I was throwing because I had no glasses. Yay. Then, as I was getting ready to come back home, also realized that along with the bus pass not being there, no longer was my wallet. So I actually had to beg for money to get home. But I thought, okay, well, no problem. I must have just taken my wallet out of my pocket and done a transaction online and forgot the wallet on my desk or something. Get home, no wallet anywhere. It is completely gone. So I'm having the feeling that maybe while I was shoveling the first night, uh, maybe my wallet was in my coat pocket and fell in the snow, and I shoveled it somewhere, and I didn't hear it fall. And well, because it hasn't been stolen, and nobody's used the cards, so it's somewhere, but it cannot be located anymore. So yes, it seems that 15 days before Christmas, I'm once again going to have to go get apply for new banking cards and credit cards, and go get all my new ID and all that kind of stuff, which is not fun, and it's the most terrible time of year for that to happen. And then yesterday, for some reason, as I was charging my phone, fortunately I had it in my hands, but I got this message said your phone is getting hot, unplug it right away. And I did. And as I did it, there was a spark that actually came up. So I don't know how close I was from my phone about to catch fire yesterday, but that happened too. Uh, so yeah, it's been a it was a very bad day yesterday. And somehow I am feeling well today. Um, regard Despite it, I'm not completely stuck because unfortunately, in my life, I have either been pickpocketed or misplaced or lost my wallet often enough that I keep an extra bank card and credit card at home somewhere in a safe place. So I'm not completely stuck or screwed because I've learned to prepare for being stuck or screwed because I have been stuck and screwed many times before, but still not pleasant at all. So, yeah, that was my day yesterday. I am hoping that my wallet is somewhere inside the house, just under something, because usually when I can't find something, it's because it is under something else. So I've been lifting everything up. But yeah, both the bus pass and both the wallet, both things were in two separate locations as well. So it's not like I lost them together or at the same time, and yet both disappeared within the same 24-hour period. Just vaporized, vanished, nowhere to be found. Yeah, that was my day. All right. But today, we're going to try to bring, by popular demand, a little bit of good news to you. It's not going to be all good news, unfortunately. Wasn't able to find that much, but hopefully a little bit of good news for you in today's show. And might be a slightly shortened show today because I do have a bus to Ottawa to catch. I had plans this evening to meet with somebody from the Dam Fam. And unfortunately, the incredible weather that we have had here has uh, put the kibosh to those plans. But I still have the bus ticket. So I guess I'm making the trip anyway. I'll be calling some friends in town and see if I can arrange a dinner, impromptu dinner, last minute dinner, and have some fun time with friends. But yes, I'm committed to go, so I'm going. But I'm very sad that I will not be able to meet uh, the member of the Dam Fam that I had planned to have dinner with. I'm very sad, but it is only a postponement. It will happen again at another time, I am sure. All right, kits and cubs. Before we get into a little bit of the good news, there is a little bit of not so good news here, weather-wise, for our friends on the West Coast. According to Nick Logan of CBC News, it seems that there is evacuation orders that have been issued for hundreds in Abbotsford, BC, amid flood warnings. It seems that there is a major atmospheric river happening on the West Coast. The article goes, evacuation orders have been issued for 371 properties in Abbotsford, BC, as heavy rains inundated southern BC and led to all major highways leading out of the lower mainland to be closed. Just after 11 p.m. Pacific time, the city of Abbotsford said that residents of hundreds of properties in the Sumas Prairie West area must leave immediately due to the risk of flooding. Officials said the orders were issued after talks with the province in neighboring Whatcom County south of the border, where the Nooksack River was among numerous waterways in Washington state to reach flood levels. Quote, floodwater is expected to arrive at the border in the early hours of Thursday morning, reads a statement from the city. A reception center has been set up at the Abbotsford Recreation Center, 2499 McMillan Road, for those needing assistance. A corresponding state of local emergency and evacuation alerts for the eastern Sumas Prairie area have also been issued. It comes as an atmospheric river is bringing a torrent of rain across the southern portion of British Columbia, with much of the Fraser Valley facing the threat of flooding and all major routes leading out of the lower mainland closed late Wednesday. The city of Abbotsford had earlier issued evacuation alerts late Wednesday afternoon for properties in the western Sumas Prairie and Claiborne Village areas and is encouraging residents to plan in case they have to leave suddenly. The the Fraser Valley Regional District, FVRD, declared a local state of emergency Wednesday afternoon and issued an evacuation order for some properties in the Chilliwack River Valley. As of 4:45 p.m. Pacific Time, the evacuation order affects 8 properties along Wilson Road and 2 others on the Chilliwack Lake Road due to the high risk of flooding. People living in the area must leave immediately. 10 other properties along Chilliwack Lake Road under the evacuation alert. FVRD is urging residents in the alert area to prepare to leave on short notice. The system moved into BC's south coast Tuesday evening, but Environment and Climate Change Canada means one over Yukon and one off the coast of California that are acting like the bread of a sandwich to create a storm highway over southern BC. He said Washington state is actually getting the worst of it, while BC is seeing mostly the northern extent of it, but that it's still enough to warrant the warnings that have been issued. And finally, for the first time reading this article, I actually understand what they mean by atmospheric river. High pressure system, sandwich, what's going between it is the river. Okay. Sometimes you just need somebody to describe it the right way to get the visual, but now I see it. Okay, atmospheric river. That's what it is. Okay. Environment and Climate Change Canada has placed central and eastern parts of the Fraser Valley, including Chilliwack, Hope Slide, and Highway 3 from Hope to Princeton, under an orange level warning with 90 to 130 millimeters of rain expected by fall by Wednesday night. And now my brain is just, I'm looking at Hope Slide and I want to dance. The Hope Slide. Slide to the left, bump. Slide to the right, bump, bump. Areas under yellow alert with 40 to 70 millimeters of rain in the forecast include Vancouver Island, Metro Vancouver, and the western portion of the Fraser Valley, as well as Howe Sound, the Sunshine Coast, and the Sea to Sky Highway to Whistler. Further yellow alerts issued Wednesday cover the Coquilla Highway. No, I pronounced that wrong. Coquihalla Highway from Hope to Merritt and the South Fraser Canyon area from Hope to Boston Bar, where 60 to 80 millimeters of rain is expected. Swaths of the interior encompassing areas in the Kootenays and Elk Valley near the Alberta boundary, such as Fernie, are also under yellow alerts. Forecasters estimate rainfall amounts there between 40 to 60 millimeters. The same system is also expected to bring 20 to 40 centimeters of snow to higher elevations in the interior. There is a yellow alert in place for the stretch of the Trans-Canada Highway from Eagle Pass to Rogers Pass, as well as in Yoho and Kootenay National Parks. Earlier in the day, the BC government issued flood warnings and watches for Abbotsford, Chilliwack, Hope, and other parts of the eastern Fraser Valley along the lower Fraser River tributaries and Sumas River. The River Forecast Center says the heavy rain also brings the potential for spillover from the Nooksack River in Washington state, the same problem that set off devastating and costly flooding in November of 2021. Flood watches and high stream flow advisories are also in place across much of the southern portion of the province. Avalanche Canada says the mild stormy weather will bring added risks in backcountry alpine areas. Avalanche Canada has warned the risk is high, red or considerable orange in many areas of southern BC affected by the atmospheric river, and that the avalanche hazard is expected to increase throughout the day on Wednesday. Colin Garrity, a forecaster and field technician with the agency, told CBC's Radio The Early Edition that avalanche season is underway, but he said there are local variations that need to be considered. Quote, at the moment, it pretty much comes down to the stormier it is, the more dangerous. Environment and Climate Change Canada updated its weather warning system last month with a risk-tiered, color-coded system that aims to offer a clearer picture of the weather's impact and indicate how the public should prepare. The alert level will be based on an assessment of both the potential impacts of the weather event and also the forecast confidence. The changes align with recommendations from the World Meteorological Organization and follow updates already implemented by 31 weather agencies across Europe. And here they have a little um, image that I'm going to share with you, graphic that indicates here we have yellow, orange, and red alerts. Yellow means hazardous weather may cause damage, disruption, or health impacts. The impacts are moderate and localized and/or short-term, and yellow alerts are the most common. The orange alerts will indicate that severe weather is likely to cause significant damage, disruption, or health impacts. Impacts are major, widespread, and may last a few days. And these alerts are uncommon. And then red alerts are very dangerous and possibly life-threatening weather will cause extreme damage and disruption. Impacts are extensive, widespread, and prolonged, and red alerts are rare. At least we hope they will be. The most common alert is yellow, which indicates hazardous. Hold on, I'll just bring myself back. That indicates hazardous weather that could cause moderate or localized effects such as damage, service disruptions, and/or health impacts in the shorter term. This goes back to describe the alerts at the end here, which I had just done before. So there's no point in rereading that. So there you go, kids and cubs. So if you're out there, please stay safe. I know that this was mostly advice for last night, but in case the weather is prolonged or continues or was more severe than expected, I haven't seen any updated weather reports, so I can't give you any additional information on that. But just so that you're aware which regions are the most affected, because chances are things could be affected for than just last night if the precipitation continues. I'm looking to see if there's anything a little more um, recent here. And no, I'm just I'm seeing some video here of some torrential rains in the area. Um, but no update. No update more recent than 6 hours ago. So hopefully there might be more today. But please stay safe, obey all evacuation orders, and if you happen to know people out there, please let them know. That there is also the CBC Light service, CBC LITE Light, in case they happen to be low on power or low on cell bandwidth and still need to remain uh, able to get information from authorities, that they can use CBC Lite, and that will take up much less of their bandwidth and um, battery power. All right, kids and cubs. Now, let's move to some slightly better news, kids and cubs. The Bank of Canada yesterday had its rate announcement and has announced that rates will be remaining stable. No change at all in the interest rate, holding at 2.25%. And there is no timeline that has been given for increases at the moment. According to the governor of the Bank of Canada, um, it is this is not necessarily a bad thing, and in fact, the governor of the Bank of Canada has been rather happy with, well, not rather happy, but noted the resilience of the Canadian economy. According to the Bank of Canada, they had in their opening statement, the bank had three main messages. First, steep U.S. tariffs on steel, aluminum, autos, and lumber have hit these sectors hard, and uncertainty about U.S. trade policy is weighing on business investment more broadly. But so far, the economy is proving resilient overall. Second, inflationary pressures continue to be contained despite added costs related to the reconfiguration of trade. Total CPI inflation has been close to the 2% target for more than a year now, and we expect it to remain near that target. So, nothing in the forecast for rampant inflation or rampant inflation growth. Third, in the current situation, Governing Council sees the current policy rate at about the right level to keep inflation close to 2% while helping the economy through this period of structural adjustment. Nevertheless, uncertainty remains high and the range of possible outcomes is wider than usual. If the outlook changes, we are prepared to respond. So, uh, the economy is proving to be resilient overall. Our CPI is close to the target, and it would seem that the forecast for the foreseeable future is that the inflation will stay among that target, and that there would be no need to either decrease or increase the policy uh, rate. Hold on, I have to sneeze. Mm. Thank you for your indulgence, kids and cubs, on that. With inflation remaining stable and the policy rate seeming to be at the right level to keep inflation stable and at the desired rate, it seems, and when the economy proving resilient overall, right now, that's a pretty good situation considering how crazy and fast changing everything in the world is around us, and how certain people, especially south of us, are definitely trying to break a lot of things. That were somewhat resilient is some very good news, and that there is no rampant inflation coming, and also no need to expect that the currency policy rate will change either upward or downward for the foreseeable future. There was some talk, as you know, I mentioned recently, the good news of Canada's economy having performed better over the past 3 years, from 2021 to 2024, than had been, or 2022 to 2024. I can't remember which year specifically, um, but had performed better. There was a big revision upwards for all three of those years in terms of our economic performance. And then we've recently had 3 months of good job numbers. Again, the inflation rate has been within the target range, or a little below, and doing well. Um, wages growing faster than salary and rent inflation, inflation remaining stable, job creation, unemployment rate going down in the midst of all this turmoil is some pretty darn good results, and it's not anything that anybody expected to see. And particularly at the beginning, when the United States was talking about tariffs, the when people were thinking that it might be like, tariffs on everything, and no Kuzma exemption and everything, the forecasts that were being put out there were pretty devastating. The fact that Trump often tacos as well, and lets things linger for a bit, has given us additional time to adapt than if he had pulled the full rug out from under us at the beginning, and allows us to create some situations where we can mitigate damage along the way. And that is what we have been doing here. According to the bank, in November, Statistics Canada published broad revisions to Canada's economic growth numbers for 2022, 2023, and 2024. The revision suggests the Canadian economy was healthier than we previously thought before we were hit by the U.S. trade conflict. In particular, they suggest both demand and economic capacity were higher coming into this year. This may explain some of the resilience we're seeing in more recent data, and it also encourages the bank to remain at this level and not have an extra cut, because now there's some thinking that maybe they cut just a little bit too much at the time and didn't need to go so far. So they're not going to make an adjustment upwards at the moment now, but they can hold flat, and maybe that's why they see um, they can hold this rate for a while, because there might come a moment where we would, if things got um, a little more hairy economy wise, that we would have to cut the rate, and we might have already have that rate cut baked in. So that's there's no need to panic or readjust, but there is some thinking that maybe they didn't need to go all the way down to 2.25 given these economic revisions. After falling 1.8% in the second quarter due to sharply lower exports, Canadian GDP grew 2.6% in the third quarter. This was much stronger than we expected, but largely reflected volatility in trade. Final domestic demand was flat in the quarter. We expect growth in the final domestic demand to resume Sorry, let me look that back again. We expect growth in final domestic demand to resume, but with an anticipated decline in net exports. GDP growth is likely to be weak in the fourth quarter before picking up in 2026. The labor market is showing some signs of improvement after declining through the summer. Employment has posted solid gains for the past 3 months, and the unemployment rate has declined to 6.5% in November. Since the start of the year, there have been significant job losses in trade sensitive sectors, but in recent months, employment in these sectors has been more stable, so gains in other sectors, particularly services, have boosted overall employment. Looking ahead, however, we're seeing muted hiring intentions across the country. Inflation has evolved largely as expected. CPI inflation was 2.2% in October, and measures of core inflation remained in the range of 2.5 to 3%. In the months ahead, we will see some choppiness in headline inflation, reflecting the temporary GST HST holiday on some goods and services a year ago. This is likely to push inflammation. This is likely to push inflation temporarily higher in the near term. Seeing through this choppiness, we expect ongoing economic slack to roughly offset cost pressures associated with the reconfiguration of trade, keeping CPI inflation close to the 2% target. The recent federal budget includes increases in government spending, particularly in defense, and measures to increase public and private sector investment. It will take some time for the impact of these measures to be fully realized, and we expect they will contribute to growth in both demand and supply in the economy. As usual, we will incorporate updated fiscal measures from federal and provincial budgets in our next economic projection in January. Taking all these developments into consideration, Government Council assessed the stance of monetary policy. After cutting the policy interest rate in September and October, Governing Council had indicated that if inflation and economic activity were to evolve broadly in line with the October projection, the policy rate would be about right. While information since the last decision has affected the near term dynamics of GDP growth, it has not changed our view that GDP will expand at a moderate pace in 2026 and inflation will remain close to target. Governing Council therefore decided to hold the policy rate unchanged. We agree that a policy rate at the lower end of the neutral range was appropriate to provide some support for the economy as it works through this structural transition, while keeping inflationary pressures contained. Finally, Governing Council acknowledged that uncertainty remains elevated. This includes the unpredictability of U.S. trade policy, in particular, the upcoming review of the Canada United States Mexico Agreement is creating uncertainty for many businesses. Canadian economy will adjust to higher tariffs. The volatility we're seeing in trade and quarterly GDP make it more difficult to assess the underlying momentum of the economy. We will be assessing incoming data relative to our outlook. If a new shock or an accumulation of evidence materially change the outlook, we are prepared to respond. Increased trade friction with the United States means our economy works less efficiently with higher costs and less income. This is more than a cyclical downturn, it's a structural transition, or a rupture, as Mark Carney would call it. Monetary policy cannot restore lost supply, but it can help the economy adjust as long as inflation is well controlled. The Bank of Canada is focused on ensuring Canadians continue to have confidence in price stability through this period of global upheaval. And there you go. That was the statement from the Bank of Canada on the economy. And also on the economy, um, the IMF recently released its economic outlook for Canada. And it is rather positive. I'm bringing you this because the context, of course, is overall Skippy or Pierre or Rerun running around the country telling us how we're broken and how, we have the slowest growing economy in the G7. Everything's terrible. Well, no, not really. This is according to the Department of Finance. It says here, um, today, this is from December 5th, the Honorable François-Philippe Champagne, Minister of Finance and National Revenue, welcomed the International Monetary Fund's concluding statement of the 2025 Article 4 mission. Today's statement highlights Canada's economic resilience in the face of uncertainty caused by U.S. tariffs and strongly endorses Budget 2025's policies to ignite competition, productivity, and investment. Specifically, the statement notes that Canada's economy has held up better than expected. That's a quote, and that its, quote, financial system remains resilient. The IMF also asserts that, quote, inflation has been contained, creating space for monetary easing. In addition to these positive confirmations, the IMF also recognizes Canada's fiscal space given its low debt burden and contained deficits. The IMF sees Budget 2025's policy actions as, quote, reinforcing Canada's productivity agenda. These actions include decisive measures to unleash investment and innovation, such as the Skill Development Program, advances in major projects initiatives, and the Productivity Super Deduction, which, alongside the Accelerated Investment Incentive, will, quote, cut the marginal effective tax rates on new capital by over 2 percentage points, reinforcing Canada as the most tax competitive country for new business investments in the G7. Let me repeat that. It's the International Monetary Fund that is saying that Canada is the most tax competitive country for new business investment in the G7, regardless of what Pierre and the Conservatives claim. They also include vital financial sector competition supports like the completion of the consumer driven banking framework. Moreover, the IMF welcomes the government's new capital budgeting framework and describes the comprehensive expenditure review, quote, as an important step in delivering higher growth focused investment. It maintains that the priority now for Canada is to manage near term pressures and advance such initiatives while meeting fiscal anchors. Additionally, federal initiatives designed to boost housing supply, including Build Canada Homes, the Housing Accelerator Fund, Expanded Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation Fund, and the Housing Infrastructure Fund, are described as, quote, addressing long-standing bottlenecks. Looking ahead, while the IMF acknowledges that the near-term global outlook remains complex, it states firmly that, quote, Canada's strong fundamentals and reliable access to external financing provide important buffers, and the IMF's latest World Economic Outlook projects that Canada will have the second strongest economic growth in the G7 in 2026. Completely different than the one that we're getting from the Conservatives and from the Conservative press here in Canada. Um, so, yes, uh, this here seems to be indicating that. The plan that Prime Minister Mark Carney, has been telling us about, and that he's translated into something more concrete with his budget, is actually geared to accomplish the things he says he wishes to accomplish. And we're getting this from evaluation from independent sources. According to the finance minister, quote, this report is a powerful validation of Budget 2025. The IMF recognizes our actions from boosting innovation and productivity to our new capital budgeting framework that relentlessly prioritizes capital investments to grow our economy. Our government will continue making smart targeted investments to build Canada strong and secure our place as a global leader in growth. Um, Now, there is a little caveat in that the IMF would like it if we moved back to debt to GDP instead of deficit to GDP as a ratio, as an anchor. But I did a little bit of research, and um, in terms of using both. What are the downsides and what are the upsides? And it became clear to me why it is that the prime minister moved uh, to deficit to GDP from debt to GDP. Um, I still think we should probably follow the IMF's advice to put debt to GDP back as an anchor. But in terms of a deficit to GDP, uh, I can understand why the prime minister is doing this, considering the current situation. Uh, it would seem that, um, how would he put it? Uh, Both uh, use GDP as a comparative metric to assess the burden relative to the economy's size, but they measure fundamentally different things. Debt to GDP ratio is a stock measure, so the total accumulated debt, and deficit to GDP is a flow measure, which measures the annual shortfall. So if you're looking at debt to GDP, it represents the cumulative total of all past annual deficits minus surpluses as a percentage of the entire annual economic output. But deficit to GDP ratio indicates the increase in total debt for a single year when spending exceeds revenue, which is the case right now, especially since we're going in to deeper spending. It would seem that the upsides of using uh, uh, of using a deficit. I'm having trouble today forming my sentences. Let's see if I can regroup here, because this is a concept that I am just starting to understand myself here. So I'm trying to bring you the best of my knowledge as I'm able to gather it together and understand. And I had found a source yesterday that was explaining it relatively well, except I can't remember it off the top of my head. But the deficit to GDP ratio allows people and markets to be able to see what's going on a little more immediately. And for the things that the Prime Minister wants to do, for example, showing drops in operational spending and proving that this is happening, that works better under debt to GDP, deficit to GDP ratio versus debt to GDP ratio. And I can see why the Prime Minister would want to show these markers and have them be more upfront, considering the changes that he is making. I will try to find that more precise information for you and bring it to you. But in the meantime, here, kits and cubs, there was an interview yesterday, someone from the IMF, and that was on Primetime Politics by CPAC yesterday. They had a guest, Ashwin Ahuja, I believe is his name, who's the International Monetary Fund's mission chief to Canada. And he, in his own words here in this interview, will be telling you how the IMF sees Canada's economy here. So please enjoy this, kits and cubs. I found this to be informative, and I'll give you a sense of how we are viewed by credible people around the world.
We're going to talk about that in a moment, but we also want to acknowledge that today the Bank of Canada gave its own assessment, holding the key benchmark rate at 2.25% and talking about the headwinds facing the Canadian economy.
Governing Council acknowledged that uncertainty remains elevated. This includes the unpredictability of U.S. trade policy, and in particular, the upcoming review of the Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement is creating uncertainty for many businesses. There's also uncertainty about how the Canadian economy will adjust to higher U.S. tariffs. The volatility we're seeing in trade and quarterly GDP make it more difficult to assess the underlying momentum in the economy.
Well, to talk about Canada's economic outlook, we're now reaching out to Ashwin Ahuja, the IMF's mission chief for Canada. Mr. Ahuja, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Listen, in a moment, I do want to talk about the recent review that you did on Canada's economy. But as it happens, you and I are talking on the same day that the Bank of Canada announced its latest rate decision, holding that benchmark rate at 2.25%. Given the uncertainty of trade challenges with the United States, do you think holding the rate rather than cutting it to stimulate economic activity is the right move?
Yes, I think the decision is well judged. In fact, I think the bank had started to reduce rates earlier, and it has already allowed the economy to face the shock from a stronger starting position. Now, from the point of view that inflation is near 2% and underlying pressures are easing, firms are absorbing the higher costs, so they're passing that through prices in a limited way. The economy is operating below potential, so there's some slack emerging. I think the decision to hold today after a series of cuts is appropriate.
Mm-hmm. How do you see Canada's economic, near future unfolding?
Yeah, I think, so first of all, Canada has absorbed a sizable external shock better than expected, right? I mean, US tariffs disrupted tightly integrated North American supply chains. We see growth has softened. but there's been no macroeconomic dislocation because Canada has strong institutions and early policy support help cushion the impact. As I said earlier, inflation's under control. This creates room for policy support. Fiscal policy is also brightly supporting the economy. The budget 2025 provides targeted temporary support in response to shock. We could see that the biggest challenge is about boosting productivity, not necessarily stabilization.
Let's pick up on that.
This is a long-term pursuit.
Yeah, well, let's pick up on that point, because it was interesting to go through your report, because productivity, I don't have to tell you, is a perennial issue for this country. And you say that does remain a major challenge given the uncertain times ahead. How do you see productivity getting in the way, or how do you see the potential of improving that?
Okay. It's not getting in the way. It's, as you said, this challenge is long-standing, right? So the productivity is not just about technology. It's mainly for Canada, it's about business dynamism. And to sum it up really quickly, in the nutshell, it's about Canada having fewer new firms, weaker competition, and slower scaling of these firms. And these are holding back productivity growth and longer-term growth. And so what you need are policies that encourage entry, encourage investment and competition, that, these things matter more than ever.
Well, the government has unveiled a budget where it talks about catalytic investment. Do you see that as improving productivity in this country?
I would say yes. I think it's in a measure. The budget has budget intends to support investment and productivity in a measured way, but also in a meaningful way. And I would like to, highlight a couple of things, as you've seen in our concluding statement, which is the productivity super deduction, the accelerated investment incentives. These will help lower the tax burden on new capital by over 2 percentage points. It's basically saying that Canada is now one of the most competitive advanced economies for new business investment from tax perspective, right? You also see in the budget a more predictable science experimental development, or SRED, that would strengthen innovation incentives. And these, I think, together are the main policies that would support capital deepening and growth over time.
So you see there's things in the budget that might be able to help. But, it was interesting in your report as well, though, to see the concerns that you're raising about Canada's financial anchors. This government looking to a declining deficit to GDP ratio and a promise to balance operational expenses as their fiscal guardrails. But it seems you think there needs to be more. Is that fair to say?
I would think that, the budget reflects a deliberate response to a shock, right? And it's done within a still credible framework. And credibility is not automatic. It's earned, and Canadian governments have over time earned it through clear anchors, transparent communication, and also consistent execution over time.
I want to point that out, Kits and Cubs, what the gentleman for the IMF just said there. Right? Overall, what we are trying to do and the changes that we are done are put in a fiscal framework, one that is credible, right? And number two, we have credibility because we have earned it over time. So again, you have the conservatives saying, oh, the last 10 years or the wasted 10 years or the last, or every time the liberals. No. This is cred, street cred that we have earned over time. That means while the liberals were in power. All right, let's get back to
What the IMF assesses here is a policy framework and its internal consistency. So on the economics, the budget doesn't signal a loss of control. In fact, it projects a temporary increase in deficits in response to a major external shock, followed by a decline over the medium term. What we want to see, reinstated would be making the debt to GDP ratio the clear top anchor with the new anchors that they announced, which are the deficit and operating balance measures used as supporting tools. I think this way the IMF sees that it would improve coherence and accountability. It would help explain how short-term flexibility, which is needed very much so at the moment, would fit within the long-term discipline.
So
All right. So to build on that, kits and cubs, what the gentleman is saying here, I found the information I was looking for. So he's not saying don't use deficit to GDP. He's saying just go back to debt to GDP as your principal one and use deficit to GDP as a supporting one. The Prime Minister seems to be using deficit to GDP as the main one and debt to GDP as the supporting one. That's the change he wants to make. Now, here's the reason for which the Prime Minister might want to be doing that. The upsides of using deficit to GDP is first that it's more of a real-time indicator because it shows how much the debt is growing or shrinking each year relative to the economy's size. And that's useful for monitoring current policy impact. So we're introducing a new policy. He wants to see how that particular policy is doing in real time and whether or not um, how is it working relative to the size of the economy? So, because the Prime Minister really wants to grow the economy, that's why we're making all these investments. So, looking at deficit to GDP puts these numbers, these metrics on how well you're doing on those fronts right up front in your face. And those are a little more dissimulated by debt to GDP. It's also an advantage as a policy tool in that it helps governments manage stimulus, which is expansionary deficits or austerity, in the short term. So, again, what the guy from the IMF here is noting is that we are having an increase in spending that is the result of a very strong external shock. But this spending within what our economy can handle very well and within metrics and doesn't affect our credibility on the world stage, and that it indicates that it will be for a short time with these levels decreasing. The IMF sees all of this exactly as the Prime Minister stated and is very clear on it. So once again, when you hear Pierre Poilievre talking about the Liberals printing money and costly budgets and government spending leads to inflation necessarily, none of this is true. None of this is true. And the upside of using deficit to GDP is that it highlights instability. So a rapid rising deficit to GDP signals potential future debt crises. So if it wasn't working, the plan wasn't working, the Prime Minister and the world markets could see it much more quickly, and then we can make an adjustment more rapidly than if we were using the other system only, which could delay the impact of that hit showing up in the numbers. The downsides of using deficit to GDP is that it doesn't show the total burden. A small deficit can still add significantly to a huge existing debt. And it's misleading in isolation in that it doesn't reflect the economy's overall capacity to handle debt. So, so there are some downsides here. A debt to GDP ratio might be preferred because of its upsides in terms of it provides the best measure of a nation's ability to manage its total financial obligations over time. So it's a better measure of long-term sustainability. The debt to GDP also contextualizes the burden. It shows the total debt relative to the economy's tax base, indicating the real burden on citizens and future generations. And it also helps estimate the debt servicing costs, which is a key factor in fiscal health. So I would say that again, having both up front, and it's not hard for the IMF to calculate the other one if it wants the numbers, but just suggesting that debt to GDP should be the main anchor. And the downsides of using debt to GDP, because there are some downsides, like I mentioned, it is a lagging indicator. It reflects past decisions and not the immediate trajectory. So if there is something, the decision that you've made that's going to impact you negatively, it won't show up as fast in your numbers as if you were using deficit to GDP. It doesn't show how the debt was used. A high debt ratio isn't inherently bad if it's financing productive assets, which again, the gentleman from the IMF is stating here that our plan is looking to stimulate or finance productive assets. But the ratio itself doesn't tell you that. Right? And debt to GDP can be more easily manipulated as a metric because governments can sell assets to reduce the reported debt and then shifting the problem down the line. So upsides and downsides to both, but the IMF would prefer us to remain with debt to GDP. But as you can see, where the Prime Minister can see some advantages in using deficit to GDP because it gives more immediate data about the actual plan the Prime Minister is putting in place and a better assessment of how that plan is impacting the overall growth of the economy. All right. Let's get back to the gentleman for his comments here.
That is one fiscal anchor you'd like to see this government do. I do wonder as well what you think about Canada's room to be making investments in this moment in time. This government has made the decision to divide operational costs away from capital costs. There are questions being asked in this country as to how much room the government actually has to make big investments when it comes to capital costs. What can you say about the health of the Canadian economy to be investing deeply in this moment in time?
I think this is the right time. This is in fact the right time, right? The budget is using Canada's fiscal space, which we see as available, more than available than in other G7 economies, but not unlimited, right? We see this using this fiscal space to support activity in the near term and also invest in the longer term growth potential, which is exactly what we would like to endorse, which is done elsewhere as well. I think though now it will be important to show a clear fiscal consolidation path to strengthen policy credibility and impact, which this budget is showing.
Mr. Ahuja, I thank you for this. I thank you for the time this evening to talk about your report. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
So overall, really good assessment by the IMF of the state of our economy overall, but of the budget itself. And we're getting an independent assessment that the budget as laid out is actually a solid plan to lead to the path that Prime Minister Carney has told us that he wants to take us down. So not only does he have the plan, not only did he articulate the plan, not only did he sell the plan to us and we bought it, but now we're seeing the plan being put in action, and now we are getting independent assessments that this particular government actually knows how to write up a plan and meet the plan that it promised us that it would do, that it ran on implementing. So this is very, very different because I'm used to governments telling us what they're going to do into an election and then start doing a whole bunch of other stuff. Or maybe getting distracted. And it seems that this one is particularly focused. This budget is actually doing that which we had intended to do. So that is a very good sign overall for us, kids and cubs. Some other news that I have for you, kits and cubs. I've had this in my back pocket for a little while. There was, let me see, I believe it was Ayad Dufour who had written up an update that appeared a few weeks ago on the major projects that were first announced in the first series and what progress had been made on them since then, around the time, and this was published around the time that the second series of projects were announced, because they got all the attention. But if people were going, well, what happened to the first projects? Well, there's a little recap here. So according to Ayad Dufour, the latest major projects announcements provided more information on how the first 5 projects progressed since being referred to Carney's fast tracking agency earlier in September. The Major Projects Office gave updates on the projects and highlighted different government policies recently put forward to advance them. Prime Minister Mark Carney previously described these projects: LNG Canada Phase 2, Darlington New Nuclear Project, the Contrecoeur Terminal Container Project, the Michelvena Bay Foreign Copper Mine, and the Red Chris Mine expansion as very advanced but, quote, needing to be shepherded across the finish line. Thursday's press conference outlined what the shepherding might look like. For LNG Canada Phase 2, it's still in the early stages with a front-end engineering and design study underway and no final investment decision. The Carney government believes its recent budget proposal to amend the Canada Energy Regulator Act to extend the maximum length of LNG export licenses from 40 to 50 years will help push the companies in the joint venture to commit money to the project. It also talks about how it plans on reinstating the accelerated investment incentive, which is a first-year write-off for most capital investments in, quote, low-carbon LNG projects. With regard to the Darlington new nuclear project, the Carney Liberals point to a $3 billion investment by federal and provincial public investment vehicles in the Darlington new nuclear project. That project was looking for another equity investor to reduce the amount of debt Ontario Power Generation has to take on for it to come online. The Darlington new nuclear project is currently under construction and awaiting a license to operate from the Federal Nuclear Safety Commission. The government mentions how a proposed tax credit refunding 15% of capital costs for nuclear equipment might also be good news for the project. As for the Contrecoeur Terminal project, the update is that the Port of Montreal has begun preparatory construction work and a memorandum of understanding has been signed with the Canada Infrastructure Bank. The project also recently obtained a permit from Fisheries and Oceans Canada authorizing the implementation of the compensation plan for Copper Red Horse feeding grounds. That was one of the two missing approvals for the project. For foreign mining, the latest update is that the project is on track to launch into production by mid-2020, facing any budget hiccups. Also of benefit to foreign is the recent investment tax credits like the one that expands the eligibility of projects that involve the extraction of different kinds of metals. Speaking at the press conference, CEO Don Farrell explained how the MPO, that's the Major Projects Office, could help with mining projects using the newly referred Crawford Nickel project as an example. This should shed some light on inner workings of the agency and, quote, we are working to come up with processes where we can run all the permitting in parallel so that we're not doing it sequentially, said Farrell. The federal government is currently negotiating to strike a one project, one review agreement with provinces. British Columbia and New Brunswick are already on board for this approach that provides a single assessment for projects requiring both provincial and federal permits. In a statement Thursday, a spokesperson from Ontario Premier Doug Ford welcomed the latest MPO announcement, but said there was a need to work together to, quote, remove federal duplication for all projects, including the all-season roads to the Ring of Fire. Quote, this work is well underway and we expect to finalize a cooperation agreement in short order. On the financing front, Farrell talked about the different mechanisms at the MPO's disposal. Quote, we're working with them to ensure that they have the proper pricing they need in order to support the project, she said, adding that work is being done through the Canada Infrastructure Bank and Canada Growth Fund. Quote, our job is all about making sure that people get across the line, get everything they need to get built on time and on budget, and ensure that Canadians have competitive mines, competitive pipelines, competitive LNG facilities. She said her office is also coordinating with labor groups to ensure there will be workers for the projects for when construction begins. So there you go. And it would seem, if I am not mistaken, that with regard to the road that had been discussed here on when talking about the foreign mining here project, let's see, where did I see that here? I saw something about a road. Oh, there we go. Nope. Sorry, I cannot seem to find it all of a sudden. Let me just do a search. There we go. Yes. So Doug Ford saying remove federal duplication for all projects, including the all seasons roads to the Ring of Fire. It would seem that there has been some movement with regard to the road. And it seems that there might have been a deal that has been signed in order to build that road or to get that road underway. So I'm seeing something here in my feed here, but this is more of a human interest story itself. Here it is. According to CTV, Lydia Chubak says that mining and road construction companies are planning to build the industrial road. Construction is underway on a new industrial road that will run east 7 kilometers from Highway 655 to Lakeshore's Gold Bell Creek mine in Porcupine. Quote, this is going to alleviate a lot of pressure from the downtown core, said Marcel Cardinal, Director of Environment, Sustainability and Security for Lakeshore Gold. Our haulage will be coming up the north end of town to this haul road, and it's been a long time in the making. Timmins clerk Steph Palmer said the project had been in the works since 2013. There were a lot of different property owners, there were different ministries involved, and there were some private partners, and there were private landowners. It was a real process trying to connect all the pieces that were required to make this bypass haul road a reality. Villeneuve Construction is one of the property owners with around 2,000 acres. Quote, so locating the right path and making sure that the road is safe and well done. Very proud of that, said Vice President Mario Villeneuve. Upon completion sometime in the spring, Lakeshore Gold said anywhere from 80 to 100 trucks will be diverted from traveling through the city's core. Quote, we'll have significant reductions in greenhouse gas emissions and energy overall, and obviously alleviating a lot of the stress on the core of the town, and hopefully making it a safer place for our residents. Timmins MPP George Parry, who is also Minister of Northern Economic Development and Growth, said the bypass will help prolong the province's financial contribution to the city's connecting link. Quote, it's imperative that we get those trucks off that piece of highway, and this is a big step, a big part of that, said Parry. That's why we need a southern link as well to bypass to get into the Discovery Mill or the Dome Mill. Lakeshore Gold officials said the road is an investment in Timmins as they plan to be operating here for a long time. So how's about that, kits and cubs? Some good news there. A road being built. Also, other good news with regard to what we are spending and investments that we are making. It seems that with regard to the Arctic, there has been an agreement here. Not the Arctic, sorry, Atlanta. Why did I say the Arctic? That the feds are going to spend nearly $40 million on Atlantic Canada's defense sector. This is according to Jeremy Hall of CTV News. Canada's Minister of Justice announced the federal government will spend close to $40 million to support Atlantic Canada's growing aerospace and defense sector. Minister Sean Fraser, who's responsible for the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, said business in the region can now apply to the Regional Defense Investment Initiative, or the IDII, to help Atlantic Canada's defense businesses grow, modernize, and win more global contracts. ACOA is delivering $38.2 million over 3 years through the initiative starting in 2025-26, said a Friday news release. It will mostly help small and medium-sized enterprises expand capabilities, boost productivity, and supply chains at home and abroad. Quote, that investment stays here in the region and strengthens Canada's defense capacity, said Fraser. Companies in Atlantic Canada are already pushing marine, aerospace, and defense technology boundaries, and manufacturers are advancing dual-use solutions to serve the civilian and defense markets, said the release. Manufacturers are bringing shipbuilding, cyber resilience, sensor acoustic systems, and let me try that sentence one last time. Manufacturers are bringing shipbuilding, cyber acoustic systems to global customers. Quote, the RDII will help more businesses pursue certifications, invest in advanced technologies, and compete for contracts with major defense and security partners, said the release. Hosting information sessions to provide guidance and details on the application process. Companies can register for one of the sessions on ACOA's website. More than 200 firms in Atlantic Canada employ more than 200 firms in Atlantic Canada employ more than 10,000 people in aerospace and defense, representing 20% of the country's defense industry employment and more than 34% of marine industry employment. The federal government announced it will spend $6.6 billion to support the defense industry over 5 years under the Defense Industrial Strategy. RDII is a 3-year initiative which will deliver $357.7 million to Canada's regional development agencies. And there you have it. So, again, some progress on some goals that we have established for ourselves, kits and cubs. All right, I'm just going to go back to the episode description, making sure that I'm not missing anything. Yes, one very important thing I did want to mention. I was watching an interview yesterday, also, I believe, on Primetime Politics. No. Sorry, this one is wrong. This one was on CTV Power Play. and it was Vashi Kapelos with former Canadian ambassador to the United States, Frank McKenna. In that interview, Frank McKenna dropped a little bomb that I was not aware of. But it would seem that at some point this year, because you know what the United States is trying to do to us with cars and our car industry, basically trying to decimate it. And I mused aloud about whether or not um, Canada and Mexico might be working a little more bilaterally in order to help our car industries, because the United States doesn't want Mexico to have much of a car industry either. So one piece of good news is that Melanie Joly, uh, who is our Minister of Industry, if I am not mistaken. Yes, Minister of Industry has announced that Canada going after Stellantis legally for having not held up their end of the bargain. So again, we have a case here of the federal government actually standing up for Canadians rather than letting a corporation get away with it. But according to the Canadian press, Industry Minister Melanie Joly says the federal government has launched a dispute resolution process against Stellantis for moving planned vehicle production from its Brampton, Ontario plant out of the country. She told a parliamentary committee in early November that a formal 30-day process is aimed at recovering Canadian taxpayer money and returning production to the Brampton facility. She said the process is underpinned by government contracts and will be initiated by the end of that business day when it was announced. So that was a big deal. If you remember, Stellantis decided in October to move planned production of its Jeep Compass from Brampton to Illinois, which prompted the federal government to threaten the legal action. And it seems that we have indeed moved forward on that. .ca. Jill's McIntosh. It says Canada puts Stellantis in default for subsidies on its Ontario plants. And this was just 3 days ago here. The Canadian government has formally told Stellantis that it is in default on contracts that could involve $29 million in taxpayer funding for retooling its factory in Brampton, Ontario, which was intended to prepare that facility for an all-new vehicle that will now be made in Illinois. It also puts some $15 billion in jeopardy for the automaker's new Nexstar energy battery plant in Windsor, Ontario, which was promised but depended on specified levels of auto production. Back in November, we reported that Industry Minister Melanie Joly launched a formal 30-day dispute resolution process, which is what I was just talking about, over the funding. Now, according to a report by the New York Times, Joly has served Stellantis with a notice of default stating, quote, "We'll stand firm for the sake of our workers, our industries, and our nation because defending Canada's economic backbone. It could mean the government and automaker would rework the contracts or that Stellantis could be on the hook to repay the cash." The plant in Brampton originally made the Chrysler 300 and Dodge Challenger and Charger before those models were discontinued. The automaker then planned to retool the plant to build the next generation Jeep Compass, including an all-electric version. But when the US announced tariffs on goods from Canada and the Canadian government put retaliatory tariffs in place, Stellantis announced that Compass production would now move to its factory in Illinois. In February, work on retooling the plant came to a halt. Stellantis also built a battery plant in Windsor, batteries for electric vehicles. The Canadian government had already advanced $500 million toward it when Stellantis halted construction because Volkswagen, which was also building a plant further east in St. Thomas, Ontario, had received substantially more for its trouble. Stellantis was then promised up to $15 billion in subsidies from the Canadian and Ontario governments, and work restarted on the plant. Joly said all of the funding depended on Stellantis maintaining a minimum employment level across the province, including operating the Brampton plant. The battery plant opened, but is going to make industrial storage batteries instead of vehicle variety. Stellantis also has an auto plant in Windsor, which makes the Chrysler Pacifica minivan and new Dodge Charger. And in November started hiring another 1,500 people to put in a third shift. However, while it says it isn't closing the Brampton plant, it also hasn't announced exactly what it plans to do with it. And apparently that lack of information is what's behind Jolie's notice of default. When it's operating, the plant has about 3,000 employees. According to a report by CBC, the feds already paid Stellantis about $222 million of the $529 pledged before the decision was made to point the compass south. Ontario had pledged $513 million for Brampton to retool, but said it hadn't paid any of it because the automaker hadn't met employment and project handed over $55 million for the Windsor plant. The $15 billion for the battery plant was dependent on the Brampton plant operating, and it appears none of that cash has been paid out so far. Stellantis has said that the Brampton plant has, quote, not closed, and that it is working towards, quote, our shared objective of securing a long-term sustainable future for automotive manufacturing in Canada, including in Brampton. However, a representative added that the process is, quote, confidential, so we cannot comment further. When the Canadian government put its retaliatory tariffs in place, it allowed a specified number of American-made vehicles to be shipped across North America, Let's try that sentence again. When the Canadian government put its retaliatory tariffs in place, it allowed a specified number of American-made vehicles to be shipped north across the border tariff-free, providing the automaker also assembled vehicles in Canada. In October, with news of the compass moving south, the feds cut Stellantis' allowable entries by 50%. It also reduced General Motors' allowance by 24.2% after that company ended production of its Chevrolet Bright Drop electric van, which was exclusively made in Ingersoll, Ontario, and cut a third shift at its factory in Oshawa, Ontario, which builds the Chevrolet Silverado pickup truck. So again, and all of these things along the way are things that we mentioned there, that the cutting of Stellantis' allowable entries by 50%, and that that another 1,500 people had been hired in Windsor to put in a third shift. But this one here, that the federal government is actually not only threatened to sue, but is actually going to use the law and show that it has teeth. Here is a change from usual procedure. Usually these companies are allowed to just walk away, and that is not going to happen this time. So that is some good news. In other good news, as I was mentioning when I started this segment, from Frank McKenna, again, former Canadian ambassador to the United States. And he had mentioned in his interview that something new that happened to us, also here brought to us by driving.ca. It would seem that in June, and this is also Jill McIntosh, Canada, something happened in June. Canada has traditionally purchased the bulk of its auto imports from the US, but now the two countries' tariff war has changed all that. For the first time in some 30 years, Canada's single-month imports from Mexico in June 2025 topped the cars it brought from the United States. According to Bloomberg, citing Statistics Canada, a total of 1.08 billion in passenger vehicles went from Mexico into Canada, while only 950 million came into Canada from American factories, all figures in Canadian dollars. That sort of ratio hasn't happened since the early 1990s. Whether that trend will continue has yet to be seen, as figures from July hadn't yet been released. Canada also imported a relatively large number of vehicles from the US ahead of the effective date of tariffs, about $2.5 billion in February and March, when it usually averages 1.8 billion, which may have given it a cushion while both countries figure out exactly how future trade is going to work. So in other words, we bought a higher inventory of U.S. manufactured cars prior to the tariffs hitting by $700 million. Statistics Canada reported that all vehicle imports in Canada rose by 6.9% in June, mostly due to that increase from Mexico, following 2 months of consecutive decline. However, imports of automotive engines and parts into the country fell by 4.8% amid declining motor vehicle production in Canada. As far as sending Canadian production out to other countries, our export of vehicles and parts combined fell by 4.2% in June. Exports of passenger cars and light trucks alone fell by 8.9% in June, marking the third consecutive monthly decline and the first time our vehicle exports have fallen before $4 billion since November of 2022. It goes on to say, in 2024, Canada was the largest buyer of vehicles made in the United States, importing more cars and light trucks from America than China, Germany, and Mexico combined, according to figures from the U.S. Department of Commerce. Of the Detroit area automakers, General Motors and Stellantis operate plants in Ontario, while Ford is still retooling its facility in Oakville, Ontario, to build the F-Series Super Duty pickup. I want to note here that this is an article that had published in August, so there might have been things may have advanced since then. Here, the plant was originally scheduled to make electric vehicles, but to meet the high demand for them. Honda and Toyota are the only automakers with factories in Canada. Among automakers that build elsewhere, Subaru Canada plans to source more of its vehicles from Japan, which has a free trade agreement with Canada, rather than from American factories. Mazda has temporarily stopped production of the CX-50 models built for the Canadian market at its factory in Alabama. Reports are that other yet unnamed automakers are shipping cars from Mexico to Canada via bonded carriers through the U.S., which protects them from tariffs. In other news, June also marked the fifth straight month of slowing sales in Canada for zero-emission vehicles, which includes electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids. According to Automotive News Canada, that's primarily due to a lack of consumer rebates, including the $5,000 federal rebate that was paused in January 2025, but which, despite hints that it might be reinstated at some time in the future, has not returned. So there you go, kits and cubs. Canada and more auto trade in Canada, at least in June, importing more cars from Mexico than the United States. And that lets us wonder, again, since we have these bilateral agreements and since we're shipping more by boat through Mexico, and since we do have a dedicated rail line now, it seems, well, I'm not sure if it's dedicated, but there is now rail from Canada to Mexico, that if we are, we might be able, if the United States wants to cut us out, do more auto manufacturing on our own. And since Toyota and Honda are the only other companies that are building cars here, at least the Asian companies, if some of the other companies want to leave, that might create an opening Hyundai to have a manufacturing plant here, especially if they do not want to build cars in the United States, like, for example, Mazda in Alabama for a sale in Canada, and then they'd have all those tariffs. Maybe those Mazda would prefer to have them manufactured in Canada or in Mexico, or a combination of both, henceforth, at least for cars that would be sold in the Mexican and Canadian auto markets. The Canadian population is just over 40 million, but Mexico is 180 million, closing in on 200. And both of us together are an attractive market that might, an attractive enough market that might create a desire for these companies to locate more manufacturing here. But at our end as well, that we are doing buying more cars from Mexico than the United States. I hope this continues, and that Canadian consumers, when they go out and buy cars, look at models that are made in Canada and models that are made abroad, but not models that are assembled in the United States. Our boycott extends to cars manufactured and assembled in the United States. All right. I believe that is most of the good stuff that I had for you today, kids and cubs. Just going to take a look at the episode description, make sure I'm not missing anything here. Oh, yes. Unfortunately, unexpected but undesired ripple in negotiation with the United States. Just a little mention here that the U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer seems to be, has been allowed about wanting to not have a trilateral agreement. Now, he hasn't outright said we do not want a trilateral agreement, but about things that would seem to indicate that the United States, and we've mentioned this on the show for the longest time, would prefer a bilateral agreement with Canada and a bilateral agreement with Mexico, separate and individual, rather than us trilateral, because the United States really hates trilateral agreements. And that's the better to divide and conquer, and the better to separate us, and the better to be able to bully us, because there's not a two against one situation, and they would really love to blow that up. That's not the best news. I have a feeling that Canada and Mexico probably have been talking about ways together sort of counter that and stand shoulder to shoulder against that, or make a common front. But not most, not the best news here, talking about seeing the United States wanting to break up the trilateral agreement. Now, of course, if Canada and Mexico stand strong and just decide, no, it's a trilateral agreement or nothing, we might end up with nothing. But that could definitely change the United States' view. However, it seems that almost all the submissions that they are getting here from the United States says that, and the United States business says that they would prefer this to remain a tripartite agreement. I think we would too. There are two former Canadian ambassadors to the United States, Director McNaughton, who are saying, yeah, we should absolutely have a bilateral agreement. Yeah, absolutely, we should go that way. Our relationships are totally different. Yes, our relationships are totally different. And Jameson Greer was alluding to the same thing when he was making those comments that are, the situations between the two countries are just so different that we are talking to them individually. And it's like, yes, of course you're talking to us individually because we have different things, but that doesn't mean that just because you're talking to us separately on certain issues, because rule of law in Canada is different than it is in Mexico, doesn't mean that we still can't have a tripartite agreement. Right. So, but yeah, the United States are definitely, littering the land with little landmines along the way, trying to blow us up, trying to get us to react, which we are not doing. Be driving the United States crazy. But yes, and we also have the irony that while Jameson Greer, the U.S. trade representative here, is talking about wanting to have separate agreements with us, and that mentioning that he doesn't, there has not been one meeting that he has taken so far that had Canada and Mexico in the same room together. He's only been talking to us individually. Let's note that at the recent draw for the World Cup, Mark Carney and President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico were all sitting in the same room together for 45 minutes with no staff. So, not sure whether or not how far Jameson Greer is going to get on that, but it's been noted for a long time that the United States would love nothing more, because it believes that one of the worst things it ever did was get involved in a tripartite deal, and would really love to put an end to that if possible. I do not understand the former Canadian ambassadors that are suggesting that it would be in our interest to have a bilateral deal with no third person or third entity there to back us up, and then just be one-on-one on the United States whenever we have a dispute, which means we lose every single dispute because the United States is just bigger and can crush us if it doesn't get its way. And anyway. If you remember that interview with Jacques Chrétien that I presented to you a couple of weeks ago with Catherine Cullen from Shawinigan itself, Jacques Chrétien made a point of reminding us that it's always been thus with the United States. No matter what trade agreements we have, no matter what deals we have, so long as they're working for the United States, they're okay with it. But so long as the second that there's a clause, they ignore that. Yeah, we bring them to binding arbitration. They ignore the ruling. We go to the international courts. We win. The United States goes, so what? So this has always been the case with the United States. It's just that now it's much more in your face with all this bold and nasty rhetoric. But Jean Chrétien wanted us to know that there's nothing new under the sun going on here. This has always been the case with the United States, that they bully us, they push us around, and we follow the rules, and they follow the rules that they want to, and that's always been the case. So, a little perspective from someone who's been in the game for a while. All right, kids and cubs, that's the end of this episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. We hope that you love listening to us because we love making this for you. Remember, sharing is caring and word of mouth is priceless, so please tell your peeps and poops all about us. It really, really warms our heart when you do, especially when you share a little bit about why our content resonates with you, because that is advertising that we cannot buy. It is so precious. So thank you. kits and cubs. We really appreciate that. If you would like us to help you because you're a busy kid on the go and sometimes you need to take on the world and you are just too busy to watch the show here, either live with the Damn Fam or at your own time, well, worry not, because Kit, the Ray Girl, has sponsored our pod page. That's podpage.com/the True North Eager Beaver. And if you scan the QR code that's about to appear right now, see how I do that? It's magic. That will bring you right there. And if you click subscribe, when we have something fresh off the podcast bandwidth, it will come directly to you. We're lightweight, we're portable, so that way you can take on the world and remain informed at the same time. Now, kits and cubs, if you would like to help us, we would be very grateful for your help. And one of the ways you can do that is by going to the True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated YouTube page and smashing with our buttons like, share, and subscribe. And I see from the Damn Fam in the chat that we may have hit a milestone crossing 28,000 subscribers. I see it on my screen too. That's a beautiful round number. Let's see if we could get it to 30. Why don't we? We have a little advertising push going on. Maybe we can do that. Only, there's 20 days in the year left, 2,000 left to go, 100 a day. Maybe it's possible. You never know. That would be so nice. We'll hit 30,000 eventually, I hope. But yeah, sure, why not? Before Christmas. But not before Christmas, before New Year's. Let's see if that can happen. But thank you to everyone who is subscribing. Click on our buttons, like, share, and subscribe. It helps us with the algorithm when you do, and it makes us really happy when we see our numbers go up. It's like watching the odometer go 28,000. Ah! Now, kids and cubs, if you would like to help us in other ways, let's say financially, because we do incur some costs to bring this show to you, we would be very, very grateful for your assistance. And you can do that by making a generous contribution to the Eager Beaver Lodge's Emergency Hydration Fund, which you can find at our coffee page. And if you would like to find our coffee page, well, I'm glad you asked, because that QR code that just appeared right there will bring you there. Coffee, ko-fi.com/eagerbeaver. Leave us a little tip. Drop some coinage in our cup. Some loonies and some toonies from you help us bring this show to you and helps us acquire staff. Hot chocolate, coffee, donuts, all of that good stuff helps us write our show, helps us produce it, helps us market it. And but our staff keeps disappearing on us. So we need you to help us replenish our staff. I don't know where they go. Somewhere down here in my tummy. We're really rough on our staff here at the Beaver Lodge. So thank you, kids and cubs, for all you do to help us bring this show to you. It means the world to us. Now, kids and cubs, if you're doing the Buy Canadian thing, we can help you there. truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com is our email address, and you just send us a direct bank transfer. None of the oligarchy in the United States get a share of your donation. And in fact, the share that would go to them comes to us. Yes, when you donate that way, we get 100% of your donation, and therefore your donation goes further. We also have the Super Chat and memberships on our YouTube page, so please sign up there too. Any way that you are able to contribute means a lot to us. Now, kids and cubs, remember, if you're not able to contribute financially, that's not a problem, because the gifts of your attention and participation are the ones that matter the most to us. So use that same email address, truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com, to write to us and let us know what you think about the show, good, bad, or ugly. Or give us some suggestions as to who you would like to appear on our show as a guest, and we will try to make that happen. It's your show too, kids and cubs. And remember, everything that you contribute to the show, whether financial or in word, gets rolled back into the show to make it better for you. So thank you so very much. Because democracy is something that you do, kids and cubs, please, we have House of Commons petition E6821 to incur our elected officials sitting there to table a law that would make it such that Canadian media should be owned by Canadians for Canadians and making news that is in the best interest of Canadians. And I've just included the link in the chat here for you to go and sign. We're now at 7,320 signatures. Let's make this baby grow, because because this is a very important subject. And Kits and Cubs, by the way, we are trying to organize some time to talk to Mr. Fed Sanchez coming back because a petition, House of Commons petition E6679, to encourage the House to table legislation that would impose consequences with teeth for MPs who deliberately engage in misinformation. Well, the signature process on that is closed, and he might have some updates for us as to what happens with the petition afterwards. So we're trying to organize a time with him so that we can bring that to you, because you did the hard work of doing democracy. So we want you to see what happens after doing that. And hopefully we can arrange a time with him relatively soon. All right, Kits and Cubs, let's see. What else do we have? Oh, words of wisdom. Don't lose your wallet. Also, don't lose your wallet and your bus pass on the same day. I've tried it. Not fun. Also, don't have a 6-ender scored against you in 2-person stick curling, if you can avoid it. Also, if you play curling and you wear glasses, bring your glasses. Lots of wisdom. I learned a lot yesterday. Okay, it could be a tough world out there. I can't believe I'm in such a good mood considering how terrible yesterday was. I think that's my other word of wisdom, probably the most important one. Sometimes bad things happen, I guess, and you just get dealt a shitty hand on a certain day, and you can fight it, you can cry, you can yell, you can scream, and maybe it's good to get some of that out. Maybe it might be healthy, but at some point, yesterday I just decided I was going to fast forward to being resigned to the fact that it had happened and just move on and solve the situation, rather than go through all the anger and sadness and depression and punching myself and punishing myself and flagellating myself for being careless or whatever. I just decided to skip all that and said, okay, this sucks. I have a problem. I'm going to have to fix it. Let's get on with it. And maybe not as satisfying as letting out a big rebel yell and throwing things around and trashing a few, but probably a lot easier on my cortisol levels. Let's put it that way. All right, kids, it can be tough world out there, so please be kind to and gentle with yourself. I will not have it to go, but I will see you tomorrow. So I will say amour et bisous right now. And tomorrow I also have some time with the lovely lady Laura. We'll be recording another episode, so watch for that too. Okay, Kits and Cubs, since it's our last moment together today before we see each other tomorrow, can I please ask for a little audience participation? With the Mr. Beaver, please cue the cock on 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh, yes. I love it, babies. I love it, you lovely, lovely, lovely people. You always make me so happy when you cock-a-doodle-doo with me. And since you have made me happy, well, there you go. There's the pod page link again, but that's not what I was looking for. Since you made me so happy, here's a little cock-a-doodle-doo. You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, their uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music.